set up or wired, their karmic propensity, you could say, is to do it a certain way. And so in our situation, with the way I do this, is to talk to each individual very personally and work with them where they're at, how they are, rather than try to get everybody to do a certain thing. So we have a setup here that is set up so that the structure, if you come here to live, then you really are, you're asking for it. And I don't mean that to be funny. I'm saying you're actually asking for some kind of really strong form. And this is pretty strong, considering that everyone here is a householder, yogi or yogini. In other words, they're combining having to work for a living. As I've said before, our culture is not supporting this. We might at some point, if we're lucky, find someone who will just look at this situation and see its value and subsidize this, help us donate or set up scholarships so someone could come here. I would like it if someone would do that, set up a scholarship so someone could actually come here and practice for a whole year without thinking about anything else other than just practice, as it was in ancient times. You could go when the society supported the spiritual path, this kind of spiritual path. So the way I do this is the way you could almost comment on it yourself. You've been here for a year and a half. Less than that, a little over a year. So, and we've worked together on your situation, and a person, it's kind of a setup so that a person, and like the way I work with precepts is if a person has doubts about this, then you're not going to do it. If a person has doubts about receiving jukai or the lay precepts, sewing the rocks and all of that, you're not doing it. So that's the way I work with people. If you're going to come this way, you need to bring a lot of energy this way for this to happen. It's too hard to do. And then then I would have to maintain, or the Sangha would have to maintain this person. So it has to be really strong energy to do that. Anyone who's received jukai from this person, at least now, at first it started out, I wasn't sure how it should all work. It took a while. But it's very individual. I see the contrast. You may not, since you're functioning, you're a young man, you're functioning as a student of mine. I work with you where you're at. And that means where I see that you're at. Who knows where you're at? You don't know, I don't know. But we do the best we can. It's a relative situation we find ourselves in. And we're trying to step with our awareness into some kind of complete understanding of everything as an individual before this body decays and falls back into the elements. We're trying to have some kind of understanding of what this is about. Other people are not interested in this. They might meditate, but they're just fine with. They don't even care about gradual. They don't care about having a teacher, other than maybe to have watch somebody on YouTube. You can jump around. There's very entertaining teachers on there. When I say entertaining, I don't mean they're deliberately trying to entertain, but they're really interesting because they do have some realization and they're able to express it. Several of them are extremely. Eckhart Tolle is a pretty charismatic fellow. He's almost better than my hand puppets. I said almost. Yes.
When, as a student, how do we function with other students that have their own personal guiding rules?
Mind your own business. Do it by example. Follow. Be a student. Follow the rules. Just do what you need to do. I mean, if there's some kind of interaction, well, you know how I handle that. If you start having difficulty with somebody, I bring you into the hojo and we look at it together. And I always also say, don't keep any secrets. Living in a community, a monastery, you can't really have secrets. Doesn't mean you have to bring out all of your dirty laundry, but actually work in a community way to help support each other. More?
I have another question.
Go ahead.
Is intuition a barrier to realization?
So realization is a concept. that we use. Intuition is a concept that we might sometimes use. I usually don't use that, but other people do, and I ask about it. Then it's kind of like some people call it a hunch. Some people call it delusion. You could call it almost anything, but I wouldn't say it's a barrier, but I think it's necessary to understand what intuition is and to see your motivation. So important to see your motivation and your intention. If the teaching person, more than likely, they're someone that is teaching what the Buddha taught, that everything is dependently arisen. If they're doing that out of their own clarity around that teaching, then they're probably going to see the way in which you're deceiving yourself by thinking you're using your intuition. Or not. It's not. I'm not saying you shouldn't. Intuition is something. My understanding of the word is you're going along and you have a hunch, you have some kind of insight into something that doesn't seem to be supported by any proof. You might dig for the proof, because you want your intuition to be correct. So then you'll look around for things to support it so that it can eventually, and that's kind of a trap somewhat, because I say you're not really, if you want to be a detective, then be a detective this direction, not this direction. So that's when I say mind your own business. That doesn't mean close your eyes. So always being on the receiving end of whatever is happening. Always on the receiving end. Yes, sir.
How do we know if what we're seeing is our motivation?
So how do we know that what we're seeing is our motivation? Say more.
But it seems like sometimes if there's a situation, like working out, for example, I've been working out on and off for the course of 10 years, and it seems like the motivation changes.
Mm-hmm.
Is that really the motivation?
How does it look to you?
I'm not sure.
Well, that's why you're asking the question. But that's a good response. I'm not sure. So I would say continue to look at that. Looking at what you're looking at motivation. You're asking a question about that. You're asking a question about intention. So I would say there's something there to be looked at closely. And it may not result in some kind of aha, oh, now I see what I was up to or what I was really doing there. It may not. So it's always about awareness. It's never about what arises in the awareness. An astonishing situation. So Sokuzan.
Sometimes it feels like seeing delusion is not clarity. A strong negative emotion arises and you see it and you really know you've been looking at this, that's not real. And yet it still continues to manipulate you and
Yes.
dictate your actions.
Yeah.
So what am I missing?
What you're missing is you think something's missing. That's what you're missing. You think something's missing. This can't be it. But that's what is which of the one is the I vow to Dharma gates. How does that one go?
Dharma gates without number,
Without measure.
That's a Dharma gate for you.
will they continue to work me like a puppet?
They may continue to look like they're doing that. But if you don't do anything with it, nothing lasts. Anything that arises will not last. But if you fixate on it, then it has the illusion of lasting. That's why when people go to war, they actually fixate and that enemy quality stays there, which is a projection. Because what is being projected on is constantly in flux, whether that which is in flux knows it or not. There's flux going on, and there is going on because there is no real self. There is no solid being anymore. It just looks that way. So that's why the awareness of something you could say just accommodate it would be. Don't necessarily have to object to that. One of the ways that that's handled on the Bodhisattva path is to actually say, it's an actual practice, part of I think it's Maitri Bhavana, where you actually say, I'm going to accept this negativity. I don't care if I have to work with this negativity the rest of my life. And on top of that, as I accept this negativity, this difficulty, give me everyone else that's having the same problem. Let me take that one on too. Let me take it away from them so they don't have to suffer.
What does that contrast to your suggestion sometimes include the senses or go into the body, how the body feels? That seems to be very different.
It's the idea of including is the sense of touch is already there. But what you're doing is you're into the sense of mind, or the sense of things arising that are scary or challenging, or you're feeling in your body, something. But there's a lot more of that. I'm not saying it's not in the body, but there's a lot of mental things that are going on there too. And when that's happening, don't forget your arms. Don't forget where your hand's at. Don't forget the color of things. All of the other senses are operating, and you, if I may say it this way, it may not be exactly this way, you are actually mesmerized or fascinated with your negativity. But if you're including everything else, then the negativity may be there, but it doesn't have this kind of dictator credential of it's going to run you. It's just part of your negativity. It's like it says here. I should rewrite this. Let's see. It is not within the reach of feeling or discrimination. How could a better consideration and thought? So it's not within the reach. What we're looking at, the realization, the understanding is it's not within the reach of it. So it's basically saying that it's not discounting your feelings. I'm not trying to say don't feel anything. We're just saying that's just part of your world. Feelings come up, and the causes and conditions that arise as your feelings have a great affinity with the causes and conditions that arise as your particular body form, your way you think, the way you even have or experience emotions, shape of your ears. All of this is outside of your say-so. You have appeared, and you've been given a name, and have been, because of our society and our culture, we've been taught that we're separate beings and that we can win, and, we can get ahead of other people, we can compete. Not wrong. It's just primitive. It's just a lower level of being a human being, where there's a lot of warfare. At one time, you had to do that, or human beings wouldn't survive. So there was a time, but about 2,500 years ago, we began to step out of that. Yes, sir.
So thoughts, each thought is created as it occurs, right?
So each thought, I'm going to repeat your question, is created as it occurs, right? That's the question. That's what you said, including the right. Each thought is included. Instead of saying "are," how would you say that as a question rather than a statement that you follow up with it, right? Because all you're saying is, all I can say to that is wrong. You could ask it.
Is each thought created as it occurs?
No. More.
Why isn't each thought created as it occurs?
Why isn't going to work in that area? I mean, when I say why isn't going to work, I'm not saying we couldn't. We could talk about the nature of thinking, and we could talk about all of the contraptions they hook up with to people to try to locate what thought even is. And they stick needles, and then they're feeling this, they're having this memory. Yeah, it's nothing. It's just primitive.
There's a problem with that word question, the word created.
It's a whole conceptual kind of thing that you're, actually there is something to what you're saying, but it's not going to be particularly helpful to go in that direction. Well, the direction that I encourage you to go and everyone to go in is to see what appears. Thoughts, emotions, feelings, memories, just see what appears and do nothing with it. They're fundamentally, as Kobun said when he translated or interpreted the mantra in the Heart Sutra, falling apart, falling apart, falling apart. Nothing to do. Did I get that right?
Falling apart, falling apart. Always falling apart. Always completely falling apart. Nothing to do.
It's very talkative, wasn't it? I would change that to say, falling apart, completely collapsed. Nothing to do.
I have more questions.
Yeah, I'll come back to you. Go ahead.
I have two questions.
Go ahead.
So I asked this yesterday in the car when we went to lunch, but I wanted to hear your answer again.
Yeah.
How does this physical form in this relative experience see the absolute?
By seeing the relative very, very clearly. The absolute, you can't see the absolute. The very nature of the absolute, you can't see it. So we have a preconception about what realization would be like, and we keep trying to see if we're there yet. Am I there? Have I got it? I do that. How do I know? I did it for decades. Yes.
Then if there's nobody realizing, what realizes?
Realization or wisdom realizes wisdom. Wisdom realizes wisdom. You can't threaten wisdom. You can't start a fight with wisdom.
How does wisdom realize wisdom?
By not separating itself from anything. Good question.
I'm still confused, but
What seeing that you're still confused is wisdom.
Well, I've heard a lot of times about the moment before a thought occurs.
Mm-hmm. Where'd you hear that at?
I know a lot of teachers, things that I've seen.
You study people besides me?
Besides you, I'd be surprised if you hadn't talked about that at some point.
I'm talking about it right now.
So will that moment before a thought occurs, will that become more clear with practice?
If you wanted to use that model, I would say yes. You know, the more you have an understanding of what thought is, we tend to separate ourselves from thought. See that I'm over here and here I'm thinking over here. Now I'm thinking about this and I'm thinking about that. And wisdom doesn't separate itself from anything. So you might sound like you're just full of it, but you don't mind being full of it because even that is wisdom. Even the destruction of other people is wisdom. It's gone awry, and it's starting to implode in some way. Yes, sir.
To say that a thought is created, would that be a discrimination?
Yeah. Thought is created. Somebody made the thought. It's a minute before the thought, a second before there was no thought, and now it's just it's an endless. This is how this whole physical world arose. It's that kind of a matrix. Yes.
Oh, Anna Maria asks, what creates thought?
Well, there's lots of ways of talking about it. Basically, it just arises as a structure, just like a tree arises, or plants arise, or human beings arise, or animals. It's arising. It's just part of the whole dynamic, part of this whole quality of being alive and having sense fields. It's just part of the whole structure. So, but as far as is there one particular place, there's nothing wrong with thinking. We're not trying to stop thinking necessarily. Quite often thinking goes haywire and starts to get paranoid, and then locates in the body as if this thinking situation here, thinking, feeling, tasting, touching, remembering, experiencing, having a name, having identity, is somehow separate from everything else and needs to be promoted or protected. And the thoughts start to go into, as a Trungpa Rinpoche called the bureaucracy of ego or self-centeredness. So in the Vichara tradition, it's the seventh consciousness. There's 8 of them. There's the 8th is a storage. The next one down, as we go directionally, is the 7th, which is the me feeling, me and my stuff, me and my idea, me. And so thought is generated out of the way we're looking at it is generated out of fear, so it becomes delusion. You can see, like with animals, you can see they're thinking on some kind of a level. Animals don't really, unless they really, really are mistreated, they really don't hold any, they don't have any memory about it saying, you mistreated me, and poop on your carpet. Yes.
2 more questions from 2 different people. The first one from Sandru.
Yes.
Doesn't dealing with, in quotations, negative emotions come from the confusion there's a me who could somehow get outside the situation?
Yeah. Very good. Yeah. You're sitting, just to kind of go through it with, based on what Sandra was asking, there's kind of this person that is experiencing, and who knows where this negative stuff is coming from. We don't really need to know where something, the things arose from everything else, dependently arisen. The Buddha solved that problem. So just to be there and don't do anything with it, but to be as aware as we can of whatever is arising, and watch it arise, watch it change its shape, and watch it fade away. What was the last part of his?
There's a me who could somehow get outside the situation.
And so we posit a self who can get away. Everyone's experienced that a little bit. You have this negativity or this feeling, and you want to get away from it rather than see that you're not really separate from it. You don't need to get away from it. You may need to feel it. You may need to actually feel. And the causes and conditions that arise as any given feeling are untraceable. I don't care how many detectives you put on the case. By the time you find some kind of a source, we finally found the cause back in the 14th century. You were functioning as a Viking, and somebody, chopped your head off. I'm just making stuff up. But that's what the world is doing, just making stuff up. That's powerful. But so the idea there through your practice is to stop fighting with yourself. Stop fighting. What happens is we fight. If we can make peace here, then you don't see warfare. All you see is people suffering, or people confusing themselves and going to war with themselves and blaming. The blaming is really, really intense.
From Kozan.
From Kozan, okay.
Is it possible to see contrast between insight and emotions?
Well, we're getting highly conceptual there. On the other hand, you can't experience anything without contrast. Anything, any experience always has its background and its foreground. But to see that those are not dissimilar is what's so amazing. We experience the contrast, But we are totally convinced that negative feelings are totally separate from positive feelings. We think there's actually something should be done about this. This needs to be corrected when it needs to be. In that situation, as near as I can tell, I'd almost have to talk with Sokuzan a little bit more to see what she is asking about as far as those concepts. But the contrast is always available on some level. If you could say stop, hold everything still that you can hold still without any warfare, and then watch what continues to flicker off and on, off and on, off and on. It's there, it's not. It's there, it's not. Or it's there, changes slightly, then it's not there. And that which sees that doesn't do anything, including separate itself from it.
Can contrast sometimes feel like judging?
Sure. You don't have to stop judging. Just see that you're judging. If you stop judging, then the judging, that kind of mental activity starts to show up outside of your awareness. It still functions. It's like it starts to function in a way that that you're not aware of it in the way you are when you just see that it's something happens and you have an opinion. You think that shouldn't be happening, or that's wrong, or that's incorrect, or they shouldn't, or they should have done this, they shouldn't have done that, or judging yourself for that matter. It seems to be only necessary to stop fighting with everything, including your own judging. And how can you do that? You have to see the judging very, very clearly. You have to see that you do that. This is seeing this, the depth of seeing negativity is where humility begins to arise. Humility, it won't feel like humility to you. It'll just be like you see the truth. And you see that you're a fool. When I use that word, this in the same way that Trungpa Rinpoche use it as a teaching. You have to have a willingness to be foolish. Not easy. We're all kind of sensitive about what if somebody sees I'm foolish? Well, they probably see you're foolish all the time. Jason.
You said that Trungpa Rinpoche would sometimes say that seems to be the basic point.
Yes.
With Hokyozan Mai, what seems to be the overarching intention of this particular poem?
Well, I think it's no self, no other. I think it's the song of the jewel mirror. It's this highly valuable mirror, and he keeps changing it in different ways so that we go through different ways of different aspects. It's like turning and seeing the facets of something. And some of them seem to be more reflective of something 3 lines ago, and some of them seem to go off on their own and be, hiding a heron in the moonlight. So you can also hide a heron in broad daylight. Sheldon just did that. This photograph. It's like, where's Waldo? Where's the heron? You look in the picture that Sheldon had posted on his Facebook. Yeah, posted on Facebook. This huge panorama of trees and leaves and water and everything, and down under this one little tree is a little tiny heron, about 32nd of an inch tall in the picture. More would be good if you got it.
How do we use this?
Take one of those and contemplate it. Take one maybe take the most difficult one. Well, you shouldn't do that because then you'd have to study the I Ching. You know what I'm saying? You have to consider the time this was written. This was written at a time where people really were familiar with the hexagrams and trigrams and so on, and what they meant, and so on. And you can, if you wanted to, you could go in and study that. But pick one, hiding a heron in the moonlight, or one of the also visual ones is a stone woman gets up dancing. The wooden man begins to sing. It's like
how do you do that? How do you contemplate? What does that mean to contemplate a line?
I think it's a little different with each person, but you can do it visually. You can do it the sound of those words. Hiding a heron. Hiding a heron. Hiding a heron in broad daylight, in moonlight. Because the moonlight and the heron is completely different than moonlight. But you can do it in such a way that this very world that we're looking at, what you're looking at, the way I say it is what you're looking for, you're looking at. You're always looking in the jewel mirror. Hidden treasure. It's a hidden treasure. You don't need to look. Buddha in the palm of your hand is another one. Buddha in the palm of your hand. You're not separate. You're not, and to see that no separation, you could take one of those lines, combination of lines, and actually reflect it. There's several ways to reflect. Sometimes I've had people write something down on an index card and just put it in front of them and do your, especially if you're sitting 6, 7, 8 hours a day, then you can bring that into your sitting practice.
To what end do you contemplate a line?
Yeah, good, very good question. There's no end. You just contemplate it until you don't contemplate it. Or you might go to another verse. But there, as far as any kind of relative result, that probably isn't going to happen.
So what is the path or practice part of contemplation?
Well, every time we study, right now, since I haven't changed it, we're studying Majjhima Nikaya, the middle length discourses of the Buddha, every day at noon as a group. And people sometimes call in if they're at the time. We study that, and that's kind of a contemplation. And it's difficult to read that material that was written a couple thousand years ago. It's just difficult, but it brings our mind into things that apparently the Buddha said to his students. And we reflect on those, and because we do it in a group, well, Sangha, we talk to each other about this material. So that's a really powerful way to contemplate it. And then you read on your own also. And so, more.
It seems that until you realize for yourself, you'll never be done with, or you'll never penetrate any single one of those teachings. So moving on to another teaching seems like, well, I haven't even understood the first one. Or I haven't even understood
You don't
the
have to
first line.
understand it.
Why do we jump around if we haven't penetrated the teaching from one poem?
I have to penetrate the teaching. It's an assumption that you have to read this and you have to understand it. This is the conventional way of studying. All we do is expose ourselves to the teaching, expose ourselves to our mind, hold still and look at the mind. Hold still and look at the mind. So we're just exposing ourselves to our neurosis. Use the common parlance. We're exposing ourselves to our wild and crazy, grasping, rejecting, shutting down, passion, aggression, ignorance, passion, aggression, ignorance. You can't correct it. So there, when we open up, we'll just use this to study. When we read this, we realize that we don't really understand that. We can talk about maybe one we liked. You just gave a talk recently on Sin Sin Ming, or the heart mind of Sokuzan. And what was that like to talk about that? What was it like for you to talk about that?
Uncomfortable.
Uncomfortable, good. That's how it feels. And that may come or go, and there will come a time, this is no promise, maybe never will come a time. Maybe this is the time when the uncomfortable or not uncomfortable is you're just not concerned whether you're uncomfortable or not. You're no longer using uncomfortable as some sign that means something else, like something is wrong, or I need to correct something. In other words, you're actually living, you actually are the Buddha. What do you think the Buddha felt? All things are dependently arisen. What a disappointment for the Buddha. It worked so hard to realize. And to realize that you can't get away from something that you're not separate from. So your own as you're talking about Sin Sin Ming to others, your own feeling of I don't know if I can do this. And it's a combination of your own judgment of yourself and your own judgment and the feeling that you're being judged by others. Being put on, you're deliberately going to put yourself on the spot. You might be able to talk about some things you've been trained in, forestry and knowledge of all the knowledge of dirt, trees, plants. What do you call that? Ecology, yeah, ecology. So information, you could get up and give a talk on that and feel fairly comfortable, probably, because it's an information. But to talk about realization, when it's something you're trying to understand, and you have a kind of standards you're kind of setting up without even being able to help it. Setting up standards, and one of those standards, one of those things that is there's somebody there that can win or lose. Some kind of an identity. Is that helpful? Any more? If you could go deeper, I'm ready. It has to be mutual.
When you had said, take a line and contemplate it.
Yes.
How do you know when it's time to go to the next line? I'm not talking about like a book study, but say personally, I write down one verse and I look at that every single day.
Come and talk to me about it. This would be one way. Another way is just go to the next one. Don't need my permission, but if you're contemplating something, especially if you're getting to where it's starting to be strained, where you're thinking, this is just never, I'm never going to understand how this actually applies to the Buddha's teaching through Sokuzan or through Dongshan Rinpoche and his words about the stone woman gets up dancing. WTF? How can that possibly be meaningful to me as I work in my life with my negativity or my feeling of, passion, aggression, ignorance that's happening? How can that image possibly help me? Go ahead.
When we decided to have me talk about the Sin Sin Ming, I brought that up because I feel really strongly about that poem. It really speaks volumes to me. But then the second I was asked to talk about it, like initially I was like, yeah, that's great. I really like that. And then the second I actually came to talking about it, I had nothing to say. I didn't know what to say because I realized all those feelings were feelings and they weren't thoughts. They weren't conveyable ideas. So how do you convey that inspiration, that meaning to others when you know that it's always falling short?
Like there's a whole lot of insight there, isn't there? To use a common word. Just do it anyway.
How?
By continuing to do it.
How do you start something like that?
I tell you to do it. That's one way. We expose ourselves to Sangha and this situation, and that was a time when I was going to be in Traverse, and I said, "Will you teach?" I don't think I demanded it of you, but I said, "What would you like to do?" And you said, "I'd like to talk about Sin Sin Ming," which I think is great. I don't think I've talked about this Sin Sin Ming. A little bit, maybe. So you did it, and you're teaching when you really are sitting, taking your seat, and you're going to take some material that you really connect with emotionally. You're going to present this to others. This is part of your training to be able to do this. Part of this path. It's part of you being a monk. It's the way that I help people, I guess, say, teach. We're inventing this. This is we're not copying what they do in Japan. And part of it is because of having studied two different lineages from Tibet and from Japan. Bringing them together has helped me, I guess you could say, realize that this needs to be needs to be using that, but only as it works with our cultural situation and with the people that are involved in this practice center or monastery. So we're kind of inventing it, yet at the same time we have pretty strong forms that keep the container there. More.
3 questions.
Yes, who from?
The first one from Shane.
Yes.
If we see that we are judging, are we still judging?
You're still, there's still judging going on, but if you don't fuel it, and when I say don't fuel it, don't try to stop the judging, because that's just ego. Don't try to justify the judging. You know, that's self-centeredness. Don't do anything with it. So, there may be, to say, is that judging? Well, probably not. In its pure form, you're actually looking at the axe you have in your hand before you hit something. You know, and you probably aren't gonna, if you really see that, you're probably gonna, you know, not hook up your vocal cords or your musculature to actually go in and say, point the finger at somebody. Even though that judging can still feel really strong, and you might see what somebody's doing, and you might think, oh, they're a clown. You might, a few words might arise like that, but sometimes those words that are just spontaneous, you don't have to do anything extra with it. Don't say, well, I shouldn't be thinking that. That is so circular to say that. I practically made myself nauseated by doing that, because you're going in circles, you're going in circles, you're going in circles. And you don't have to do anything but just be present. Just, this is what we learn on the cushion. We learn how to just be here, and whatever comes, don't take it personal. Yes, sir. Do you have another?
2 more.
Oh, go ahead, please.
From Sokuzan.
Yes.
You mentioned immediate insight.
Yes.
It seems that sometimes that comes with an emotional feeling. Is it possible to see if that insight is a belief in disguise? And then she says, insight that is nonverbal insight.
I think I'm following what Sokuzan is asking. Would you repeat it one more time?
You mentioned immediate insight.
Okay, now stop. I did. Did I? Did I mention immediate? I'm not trying to.
Instant realization,
Instant.
gradual.
Instant and gradual.
Oh, okay. She's referring to instant as opposed to gradual. Okay, go ahead. I got it.
And well, her previous question is it possible to see contrast between insight and emotions as well? So, you mentioned immediate insight. It seems that sometimes that comes with an emotional feeling.
Probably always will.
Is it possible to see if that insight is a belief in disguise?
Yes, especially if that's something that if you're actually asking that question, you're already very aware. You already have your antenna out to see if something is trying to go to war. You already are aware of that. But the important thing is, if you see it, don't go to war with that. If you see that something is a disguise, if something is disguised in such a way that you're trying to get a position on something, that you're believing in something with no proof, just doing it for your own benefit. So I would say that just by asking that question, and I would say, well, first of all, I would say yes, it is possible. And I would say that on top of that, I would say that the way that goes on, the way you're asking the question goes on, is saying you're already looking at that, your awareness. You could ask the question. That's why often I say, ask me questions, not so much because I'm going to have a great answer, but it gives me an idea of where your mind, how you're working with this. So that's, can't ask a question like that unless you've contemplated this quite a bit and seen what it's a hard nut to crack. It's a conundrum, trying to bring the awareness, the intellect, and everything, the insight, whatever fancy word you want, to bear on what is this? What's the fundamental nature of what is happening here? We can see all of the various things that are rising and falling, and it seems that it is only accessible through seeing completely what is relative. You have to see the relative world and see that it is dependently arisen. Not trying to stop judging. Go ahead.
So from Anna Maria,
Yes, Anna Maria.
What is not disappointing about not dependently arisen?
What?
What is not disappointing about not dependently arisen?
Okay, I'm following her. I think. Okay, what is not disappointing? Anna Maria, how long did it take you to come up with this question? Okay, what is not disappointing? Well, you feel that you're. So if I understand what she's asking, you have this illusion. This it's not disappointing because you have this little world that's temporary, a little heaven realm. Is that? Yeah, just kind of a little. Well, everything's really good, and I'm in this one. Everything's successful. I'm getting this. I'm getting that. This is working out well. People like me. People really appreciate who I am, what I do, what I know. I'm still usually that stuff can work really well, but you notice as you get older, it starts to get more and more irritating. You don't manage to stay young, even though I think they did find the fountain of youth somewhere in Florida, right? There's some reason all those old people are down. Go ahead.
So would that be living in your delusion then? To not
Yeah, believing that the relative world actually is supporting you because you're in the right spot at the right time with the right hairdo. You figured it out and you're here. The problem is it starts to crumble and come apart, and then we try to patch it up with whatever, with drugs or with anything to keep our world dependable. And what's being said here is let it fall apart and experience your beingness and include the negativity that's going to arise, because we've been shutting down on this negativity probably individually in so many different ways. That's why we find ourselves in difficult straits. Michael.
What did you mean by don't try and understand it, or you can't understand it?
Yeah, you just be aware. Just be aware. So being aware means stay in your senses, how it feels. You just scratched your chest like that, how that feels, how things are each moment. When you get out, you go and get in your car and drive away. You watch your thought patterns come and go, and you watch how you judge. Don't stop the judging. We don't need more judging. Notice how we have opinions and ideas and everything. We just, through our awareness practice, we've become stronger. We more and more prioritize just the awareness of what it is, of that it's arising and falling, and seeing that our allegiance to good and evil, and to getting things right, our allegiance slowly starts to shift over to just seeing what is true. And what we see when we eventually get to that, you could say, hey, use a relevant way of talking about it, we see that everything is dependently risen. And if you see that, then it solves everything. It also allows suffering and pain and difficulty to come and go, and we're just not at war anymore. Yes, sir.
So the stone woman stands up and dances.
That's what I hear.
So there is nothing to understand there. Or
sure. What does it look like to you? I mean, I have my idea about what that means. Would you want to hear mine, or would you like to tell me what you think?
I'm not worried about what I think about that or what you think about that. It's the idea of.
Should be.
I'm not.
Lost again. Okay. What would you like to talk about then?
I guess it's this idea of not having to understand that one line.
Well, that's a pretty obvious line. So I think that one should be one you should understand.
All right, the mountain walks.
The mountain walks. What about it? It's because it doesn't walk that it walks. And it's because the stone woman doesn't move at all that she gets up dancing. It's just a way of talking about the absolute and the relative. The literal, or the way that I think about it, is the stone woman. When you see there's no self, you see there's no solid being anymore. It's like being made of stone. You realize that anything that happens, it's not about a centralized notion of identity. So you can dance, and you can dance probably even better because there's no concern about being this kind of person or that kind, or a good dancer or a bad dancer, a good singer, a bad singer. There's just singing. No one really behind it, particularly. But the causes and conditions that arise are so incredibly vast and variegated, and so much like a matrix.
I guess the question is, what is understanding?
Means to stand under. In other words, you stand under it, you see what it is. To take the word the way it's used, actually see what that is, understand it. But the understanding doesn't lead to more commentary on it. It's just you understand. If I look at everybody or interact with everybody here, I see the way that this is not separate. Even though it's showing up as separation. The very question and answer situation is a setup for separation, so that we can function in this kind of a dynamic, and hopefully it will be helpful. I don't need to be here. Do you need to be here? If
Yes.
you do, then I'm here. If you don't need to be here, I'll leave. Go somewhere else. We'll move to Florida where the Fountain of Youth is. I hear it's somewhere near Tampa, about 40 miles southwest of Tampa. No, that'd be out in the ocean. Maybe that's why they haven't found it, because it's actually out in the ocean. So do you follow me? It's a mutual situation that we have here. Very mutual. Yes.
Another question from Sandra.
Yes, certainly.
Is the stone woman dancing related to the idea that this moment is complete, whole? Because I believe in time she won't get up and dance. But if it's just exactly this, I don't plan on how she'll be in the next one.
Yeah, you don't care whether she dances or not. She can sit there and just be a pile of rocks. Yeah, it's very much, that's a little bit more difficult to get to that understanding of it. And that's where there's nothing more to add, nothing more to understand, other than it's just this. But we need to talk about a relative, a stone woman. A woman made of stone isn't going to do anything. Made of stone. But if a stone woman gets up and dances, then what? We're talking about the incredible magic that is available right here in this relative situation that we're in. It's Trungpa Rinpoche called it ordinary magic. It's because it's very ordinary, and it's just astonishingly beautiful and tragic at the same time. At the same time, not suddenly very happy. No, it's happy and sad. All thoughts vanish into emptiness, like the imprint of a bird in the sky from the Sadhana Mahamudra, Trumpa's sadhana. It's just this. Any final questions before we close? Yes, Ryan.
Does awareness or consciousness exist without a vessel to perceive it?
Okay, say it one more time. Without a vessel.
Yeah.
Like a body.
Yeah.
More than likely. You ever had a dream? Yeah. Remember that body?
Hmm.
Uh-huh. I like that. It's a good response. I'll use that. Find out. This is a really good question, but it's rather than for me to say it and you have a concept and you say, well, Sokuzan says this or whatever. I would say it's a good question. Go into that in your look at that. See if you can see what awareness is. It's I'm not here to show off particularly, although I know I'm incredibly interesting. But I can move my awareness into the other room. And I don't have to prove it. Awareness is not located anywhere. There's no location. It can be spread all over the place. And when there's no longer grasping at a self or grasping at another, you're free. You're not free from something or free from something or free to do something. You're fundamentally free. In other words, you're no longer a prisoner of your emotions, your feelings. We're not saying that the emotions don't get a hold of you and make you feel bummed out or happy or sad, but that doesn't point to something else. It doesn't like point to something you need to do. You don't have to correct yourself. You're not separate from the Buddha. The Buddha did it. You don't have to do it. It's like the whole Christian idea of Christ died for your sins. It's a little bit more primitive situation. I'm not here to particularly comment on that, but any spiritual path, whatever it is, even theistic paths have some kind of inspiration happening to transcend this world. And the Buddhist approach is it's already transcended. There's never been any separation. Spiritual and mundane. Not separate. Thank you so much. Move that back.
May this penetrate to all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Ji-ho Sam Shi 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 Son Sam Sam Mo Ko Ta. The 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna Paramita,